The change that we must embrace is not a simple change of political structure or economic policy, but rather a complete revolution of consciousness and awareness within the human mind.
We are witnessing the fall of the republic as tyrants try to make us all their subjects. They buy up newspapers, TVs, and magazines as they try to implement a fascist regime. Corporations have been enthroned in the U.S., so all major media outlets are now useless.
Now we're going to start off the second hour with an online friend of mine who I'm speaking to in the flesh for 2 years, Benjamin DeVries. I met him a couple years ago through Facebook, through the online group, the Global Strike. There was some big calls through the internet and Facebook a couple years ago to just start boycotting the system and things like that. And so I was kind of interested in that and wrote an article for it and talked with Ben then. And since then, we've just kind of communicated online, and I've watched his work there. He calls himself the permaculture activist, I guess you could say. Ben has a lot to talk about, but today, though, we're going to focus on the solutions aspect of what he does and permaculture, his interests, and all that type of stuff. Because, you know, it's become more and more of a topic of conversation, really just in the past week or so, around the Freethinker House and in my mind, and I think online as well. The idea and the focus on solutions more than ever, not just solutions like positive news and trying to inspire people, but taking real world steps to empower ourselves in the now and in the future, and in the case that they become necessary and life-saving. For example, at the Freethinker House, we just recently held a canning, jarring, homemade bread making skill show, which was led by my grandmother, which is an awesome event. The video for that should be up probably before this show's over if you want to check out the Houston Freethinkers YouTube channel. And these are things I want to focus on more than ever. How to make a prep bag, what some people would call a bug out bag, but just a bag of supplies that you may need in the incident that, you know, power goes out or who knows what happens. These things they're not extreme as the government may have you think. They are perfectly normal. When I speak to my grandmother, talking to her about how she lived her life, she's always lived her life this way, you know, just being prepared, just looking towards winter, you know, growing food and stocking up for winter. What would you do in a hurricane? What would you do? All these type of things. It's just helpful. It's just smart. How are you doing, man?
Oh, geez, I'm fine, except for this seeming technical difficulty.
Just kind of introduce yourself, let everybody know a bit about yourself as an activist and just as an individual.
Well, I won't even say that I'm an activist. Actually, I tell people that probably the thing to do is to stay away from demonstrations generally and spend time doing productive things, creating your own alternative economy, your own community autonomy economy is going to be far more productive than having it out with the cops, because you're undermining their economic base by creating an alternative economy. You're undermining the central control economic base. Maybe a little bit at a time, but if enough people do it, they become irrelevant, and that's what you're really shooting for.
Exactly. We're trying to work towards making the system irrelevant, and that's sort of an approach that, well, not sort of, it is an approach that I've become closer and closer and more fond of, because it's, you know, some people would call it agorism or agorist, choosing to work to create alternatives to the state so we can make it irrelevant. And like you said, it's not, one person's not going to overthrow the state in that regard, but together, collectively, we can make change and can make them irrelevant, and give also the people who are ingrained in the system, who may, in another instance, may choose to not support them, if given an alternative, we can provide them with that alternative.
Yes, exactly. That's one of the places, you know, forensically, where the Vietnam anti-war movement failed was, you know, it's fine to be against something, but when the against reason is removed, your raison d'etre, reason for acting or existing, is now gone. So you have to be for something, and so I suggest start with being for yourself, you know, and DIY as much as you can. We always put up articles and movies about how to make your own methane out of your own manure, and so let me start by getting some plugs in for people who may not be familiar with these things. Google these two terms, CD3WD. Okay, that's the first one. If you can't find the answer there, then it's going to take a bit of digging, because this is 13 gigabyte library of how to do everything from raise crocodiles to wire your house to make mud bricks to make methane out of sewage. The second one I want to point to is Humanure, which is a pretty simple manual put out by Jenkins on aerobic compost of human waste. And one reason this is really important, especially in a place like where you are in Texas, is that in permaculture, at least, we have what's called a type 1 error, a flaw in the basic assumption. Well, the basic assumption in this case is that it's okay to, one, mix perfectly good drinking water with human waste, which is a terrible mistake in an arid climate. And the other one is that if you look at the way that it's set up, is that people don't normally think in their supply chain about like how that toilet is attached to miles and miles of steel pipe, and the steel pipe, of course, requires coal, requires iron ore, and all of these things that are going into this highly material and energy intensive process. The coal. So you don't think of your flush toilet resulting in mountaintops being blown off, but that's actually what's going on. So by making a simple change and correcting the basic error, you're able to short circuit this ridiculous supply chain that's been created to plug you into. The other thing that's very important that I want to mention about Humanure is that in a situation where that does go off, say someone decides to turn the water off, or there's a water shortage, or some other reason that that the whole sewage and water system goes off, is that you need to be able to protect yourself from things like cholera and dysentery. You have to know enough about sanitation to keep everyone from getting sick. This is critically important. As anyone who's been through a hurricane or a rainbow gathering knows, that sanitation is absolutely critical if you intend to survive more than about 3 weeks. 3 weeks of dysentery can do you in, or at least your kids. And so those are a few things. But I also want to touch on talking about the surveillance state. What I'll say about it is this. If they're watching, great. You know why? Is because we can completely jam them with an overload of information. Okay? We can. There are all kinds of ways to provide false information, false meetings, false action, so you can falsify information to give them. It seems like there are leads in every direction, but none of them seem to go anywhere. And also, just the sheer volume of information is going to require, if they throw it into a parser and able to sort for the keywords they're looking for, what have you, is that they're simply not going to have the manpower to analyze the information, let alone act on it. Okay? So by instead of trying to keep everything secret, you just flood it with this ridiculous amount of over-information, disinformation, misinformation on your end. Right? Now they've got so much they can't even deal with it. And I think this is really an effective strategy, because it'll tie up their intelligence assets, it'll tie up their analysis assets, and keep them busy on this wild goose chase, And so that's one way to deal with the information collection apparatus.
Yeah, I definitely enjoy that aspect. We've kind of played with certain methods of that, such as like when it comes to Facebook, how they want to facially recognize every picture you put on there, starting to tag friends' faces in things like the sky or the lake or the chair or random things, just to sort of throw off Facebook's facial recognition software. So I'm with you on that, man. I think we should find creative ways. If they're gonna be watching and listening, we might as well be saying something and jam up their system with as much. I think we should have disinfo jams. Man, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I kind of got into this when we were waiting for you on the first break, talking about the recent announcement this week of chasing Al-Qaeda into Africa.
They have been trying to set this up any way they can for probably about at least the last 3 years. It's probably been in planning longer. AFRICOM, or the African U.S. Military Command. The reason is the same reason that the Europeans wanted to divide Africa up like a turkey in the previous 3 centuries, and that is because Africa is loaded with resources. And, to prevent them from squabbling with each other, the European powers decided to carve it up according to arbitrary boundaries in order to determine which pieces of the turkey were going to be had by whom, so that they would not fight internally over it in Europe again. Okay? So the U.S. is a little bit late on that action, being a little bit further away from Africa, although we did get a significant amount of human resources out of Africa in the previous 2 centuries. They call that slavery. What's really going on now, and I think we can really pinpoint this, and the reason that the whole Coney 2012 thing, and Coney is washed up. He's nobody. Okay, Museveni is just as bad, and runs Uganda now, but he's buddies with the CIA, and so they want to pave the way, U.S. bases in Uganda. Well, why Uganda? Well, the reason is because you're next to Uganda is a perfect staging platform to gain control of the coltan fields in eastern Congo. And what's really significant about this is that Congo is one of the last known unexploited sources for niobium, and you can run a war machine a la Hitler on iron and oil, but you cannot run a high-tech war machine with cruise missiles and high-tech electronics without niobium. Takes niobium. The Chinese control 90% of the existing sources of supply. So, and obviously the Chinese aren't going to invite us in to glom on their resources, or the United States. I don't know who this us is really, but so what's going on is that now it's needed to create these propaganda covers. For example, Avaz.org is they say peace, but that's funny because every time they turn around, they're paving the way for military intervention and trying to get the bleeding heart left to support military intervention on humanitarian grounds. Well, this is totally wagging the dog. And you've got, one.org with Bono, and I hope they sell more records with pictures of starving African children. But let's face it, they have a terrible track record. You can't believe everything you hear from these NGOs, because most of the time they're financed by ulterior motives, like what's the one, the 350.org. Well, that's funny that 350.org took so much money from oil companies. Well, what happens if every time you scream global warming and end of oil and all of this? Of course, the price of oil rises and the dividends go up. It's the same with gun sales. You start screaming, oh, they're going to ban their guns. Gun sales go through the roof. Okay, so this is all wagging the dog to get people to pump out their money in various directions. The resistance strategy in this case is stop giving them any money.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that, Ben. We have to stop feeding this machine, especially, if we're feeding them Federal Reserve notes. We have to find ways to create alternatives to the system. That's kind of what we started the conversation with, is just finding alternatives, seeking alternatives, instead of going out there and trying to take the police head on, or
you're going to lose.
Exactly. Expect the politicians to do what you want. You have to find and create solutions ourselves. So that's definitely a better method to take. What I think is important to take from this conversation, besides the practical knowledge of looking into permaculture and looking into making yourself more sustainable, more self-sufficient, is that whether we're facing African Al-Qaeda or FISA surveillance or drones in the sky, whatever the issue is, we can find a solution. We can find a people-powered solution, really, not a state solution. And that's what I'm after. I'm after trying to empower myself and empower each of you who are listening, and that's also what Ben focuses on through his work, man. But I definitely want to continue this. We've got a couple more minutes with you. I'd like to just let you finish this interview, these last couple minutes, with whatever advice that you may have. You know, when we're looking at Africa, we're looking at the FISA amendments and all this stuff. What advice do you have for people looking forward to 2013, just when we're talking about solutions?
Good advice is start at home, use what you have, ignore the blabbering from the talking heads. No politician, no voting, no reform is ever going to give you a solution. This is, in my opinion, is unreformable. So you're going to have to do it yourself this time. Catch the water off your roof, start growing your own food, get a couple of chickens to make eggs every morning, and really concentrate on material solutions to your own problems in your own life. Know where your water's coming from, because you're not going to last 3 days without it. You will die, you know, especially in a place like Texas. So these are the things that people should really be concentrating on, not all of this blah, 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 or I clicked here, or you know, but the NGO is going to save us, the politician's going to save us. This is all a bunch of lies, okay? This is all a bunch of distractions. What you need to do is concentrate on your own community and talk to your neighbors. Stop acting like your neighbors are the enemy, okay? You got to talk to these people. You got to deal with these people if you want to make it through this, because if you don't, they're not going to be your friends. They're going to be people that are going to turn on you, okay? When they get desperate. And they may be ethical today, but when you stop feeding somebody, they start acting funny, okay? And so you got to be prepared for that kind of situation. Also, having a big stash of food is good, but it's not going to be enough. You're going to need to be producing your own food to liberate yourself from the industrial food economy. This is the only way that we're going to take a bite out of these people, is by doing it ourselves. You know, and most people will be probably pleasantly surprised that when you do tear up your whole backyard, you're like, man, now we have more vegetables than we are able to eat. And this is, you know, so that in itself is very satisfying, let alone what it does to the grocery bill. It's very easy for even a small lot in an urban situation to run the grocery bill in reverse, have a surplus that you can trade away. This is all good things. And don't forget guerrilla gardening. If no one's paying attention to it, it's a great place to grow some food. You know, don't ask permission, because they'll tell you no. Just go ahead and plant it up, and everybody will say, oh, look, what a nice garden there was, where there was just that trashed empty lot. You know, and do it with low care, things like grain, millet, sorghum, wheat. If you're planting in winter or early spring, you can plant wheat right now, even probably in Texas. You know,
we're gonna go to a quick break, real quick, Ben, and out. You're listing very practical things for solutions for next year. You know, like we've been discussing, we have a surveillance state. We've got NGOs that are pushing for global peace, spreading peace around the world, as they like to say, humanitarian wars. We have food prices rising. We've got an economy that's unstable. You know, we need solutions for these uncertain times, and that's what I'm interested in hearing about from you.
Okay, since you're down there in Houston, this is big time oil land. Well, oil can be made to be irrelevant as long as we're on gardening, and pyrolytic gasification is the process. You can look into GEK gasifier. I think they're at GEK.com. There's also another home unit, Liberty gasifier. There's also the next step up, industrial size unit of gasifier. That's let's see, EPRIDA, EPRIDA.com, EPRIDA.com. But basically, what it does is that you take any cellulose, grass clippings, twigs, leaves, what have you, crop waste, and this is not grain, mind you. That's a whole other story. Grain is unnecessary. You can make your own fuel to replace gasoline using the pyrolysis process. Okay. And there's actually some larger competitive plants going in the Midwest where they make a lot of corn. Well, they don't feed the thing corn; they feed it stalks. Okay, and so making your own fuel to keep your own vehicles running is a key step in breaking this stranglehold that they have on us. This economic stranglehold. So there's one. Another good place to look is Appropedia, Appropedia, Appropedia. If you look in there, it's a collaborative platform for sharing of appropriate technologies, for sharing information about anything from evaporative refrigerators to bicycle-powered washing machines. So that people can discuss what they have, successes that they have with these things, and come up with better collaborative solutions. So those are a couple of things: pyrolysis, Appropedia, CD3WD. You with me so far?
Yep, right here with you, man. I'm loving these tips.
It's good to get feedback just to make sure that the line is still on. And also look into water harvesting, although like many states this is illegal, but then what isn't illegal these days? And it's very good to find what you can scavenge too. Improve your scavenging skills. Start on your post-apocalyptic lifestyle. Start on the ground floor with your post-apocalyptic lifestyle. Start scavenging 55-gallon drums for water. Things like this. I'll
talk to you. I want to get your opinion, Ben, just to kind of shift gears here, but still related to solutions. And how do you feel about solutions for? And I try to figure things that can be practical and help us in the now, but also think of possible solutions where we may have to, react and things like that. Well, I'm thinking of how we could grow vegetables, grow crops in a way that could protect us from, say, spraying in the sky or GMO cross contaminations. I've heard and read things about people trying to grow things underground. I mean, have you considered any of these ideas, and what kind of solutions have you come up with?
All of this is highly material intensive, and there's a serious problem with that. In that, when you have these extremely materially intensive processes, this leads back into the initial problem, which is the industrial supply problem. So unless you're producing all of these light bulbs and sealed chambers and all of these things that you're going to need for these processes, then you're only feeding the thing again. So it's better not to be dependent on those things. As far as GMO cross-contamination, you just simply select crops that have not been genetically modified yet. Inca crops, things like tarwi bean, or just basically selecting different crops. Because now if you grow corn anywhere in North America, it's going to become contaminated. There's really no way around it now. Corn is a goner. So you're just going to have to give up on corn. Start growing millet. I don't think they've modified millet yet. Sorghum. There's a very nice variety of white popping sorghum, which processes easily by hand. That's a real good one, and would probably do well in your climate also, Derek. So selecting lesser known species that haven't been tampered with, then that's really the best way to prevent GMO contamination. Sorry?
Do you think it's even possible, like you said, in North America? I mean, it's pretty impossible to avoid contamination of corn, because we have 93 to 98% of the corn is already genetically modified. You can still buy heirloom seeds, but you are still risking of cross-pollination. So, I mean, what type of solution would you offer besides, just starting off? Because definitely I use non-GMO, heirloom, non-hybrid seeds, but there's still the danger from other people growing their seeds.
And corn is like most grains, is a wind pollinated crop for the most part, and so one of the things that the best thing I can suggest is lay in a good stock of those seeds, keep them dry, keep them pest free, and wait until the tractors stop running. That's the best thing I could say about corn and at this point. As far as wheat, try growing an off-season wheat that is non-contaminated. I suggest Kamut makes a good summer wheat, which, so if you plant off their planting schedule, most of them are growing red winter wheat, for example. So if you plant off their planting schedule, then it'll go to seed at a different time, and that same pollen won't be in the air at the time when your wheat is pollinating.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna let you go for today, man. But I have a feeling I'm gonna be wanting to talk to you again soon, as throughout the year, actually, because I think 2013 needs to be the year where, if you haven't been making preparations already or becoming more self-reliant yet, then this is the time to focus on that. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Great. Thanks a lot.